All right, well, hello everyone. I'll call to order the September 11th meeting of Heritage Guelph, welcoming all committee members, staff, and any guests that are attending. I'll start with our territorial acknowledgement and note that as we gather, we are reminded that Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabeg peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting. And before we get into the approval of the minutes, I'll just ask if anyone has any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. And I see David Waverman, your hand went up first.
To speak to or vote on 2187 Gordon Street.
Perfect. And Kim, I think you're on that one too, right?
Yeah, I'm also with David. I will not be able to speak or vote on 2187 Gordon.
Perfect. When we get to that one, I'll just have both of you turn your mics off and your cameras off, and we'll move forward without either of you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A bit of a point of order on those. My understanding is that just to make sure people do it in the registry, that the I don't know whether Jack can talk about that. Well, you also have to give the reasons why you have a disclosure of pecuniary interest as well. But there's a registry online where every council member, it'll be the same for committee members, has to log when they declare a conflict.
Yep, I'll circulate the form via email.
I filled out the form. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, all. It's Liz from the clerk's office. Yes, Councillor Downer is correct. David and Kim, if you can just explain to the committee just briefly why you do have a conflict of interest with this item. That's just part of procedure. Thank you.
I guess we should just speak for ourselves, even though it's the same reason. We were involved with the direct employment by the client or the property owners of that property to prepare the initial cultural heritage resource impact assessment and evaluation reports.
So I was also involved with David Waverman for consulting work outside of this for the preparation of those reports as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim and David. And I guess we'll have David fill out that form that Kim's already filled out then. Perfect. And thank you, Kathy, for the prompt on the procedure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so our first sort of formal agenda item then is approval of the minutes from August 14th. So if I could have someone move for their approval. And Jada, thank you. I see your hand up. And a seconder. Kim, perfect. And then all those in favor and anyone without their camera on will have to put their camera on for this part. So Laura, if you're with us, if you could, there you go, perfect. Thank you. Excellent. All right, so moving along then, we have committee items. So we have the Ontario Reformatory Stone Wall, which is a presentation of sorts from Councillor Downer.
Yeah, so I don't have a real presentation. I just requested that staff put this on the agenda because I thought it would be good for Heritage Guelph to request that council ask that the reformatory, that Infrastructure Ontario repair the wall. Now, I don't know whether Jack or Stephen can give us any kind of an update, but my understanding is that they believe it was erosion, but many people who frequent their reformatory lands claim that that wall was there one day and gone and kind of dismantled the next. So I don't know if you have any updates on that, Jack or Stephen, on what your thoughts are, but you know, if I can't move this motion, but I can propose that somebody on the committee does move the motion if they would be willing to.
Councillor Downer, I've just want to comment that I have made Infrastructure Ontario aware of city's concerns, or at least heritage planning's concerns, and I have visited the site myself, but I haven't heard any any official response back from Infrastructure Ontario that would support one way or the other, whether this was simply due to erosion or if it was assisted in any way.
Okay, so that was just not just, but that was a press story then that I guess they must have gotten quotes. Okay. I wasn't sure whether that was official or not. So thanks for that clarity.
Cameron?
I was asked which or where is the wall on the site that we're talking about?
It's when you enter at the main gate off York Road, if you follow the pathway towards the main building, it's before you get to the bridge. So there's the initial bridge over Clyde Creek. And as you continue down the pathway, you eventually come to a second bridge. Before that second bridge, on the left-hand side, there's an opening into the front field that has always been there. And unfortunately, on either side of the sort of stone pillars that are on either side of that opening, the wall has been dismantled. I'm there all the time. I can tell you with certainty that those stones did not fall down. In my opinion, sorry, I'm not an expert, but this isn't a matter of a few stones. It's significant damage.
Yeah.
And so to Kathy's comment, there is a motion that's proposed that was included in the agenda. If someone would like to move it, it's that Heritage Guelph recommends that City Council request Infrastructure Ontario to repair the stone wall at the Ontario Reformatory. And I see Miranda has your hand up to move it.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and a seconder? I've got David Waverman, and then all in favor. Kim, thank you.
Thank you.
And
This
just
will-
need to see Laura's, there we go. Perfect, so it's carried then.
Yeah, this will come to a council meeting in October, I believe. Thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank you. All right, and moving along, I think, into a fairly full agenda today, we have our first designation update, which is 49 Metcalfe Street Heritage Attributes and Designation Recommendation with a presentation from Jack.
So for this first designation update, I actually heard back from the property owner just this morning for the first time, and they'd like to discuss the designation, and I'm optimistic that we can get their support. So I'm going to ask the committee to defer this item until October's meeting, just so that I can have these discussions with the property owner prior to bringing a staff report to the committee. I have a proposed motion. I'll share my screen. Can everybody see this? And this will need to be moved and seconded if the committee is comfortable with that.
Jaudat, is your hand up to move the motion? Yes? Okay, perfect. So Jaudat has moved the motion that Heritage Guelph defer item 3.1 of the Heritage Guelph agenda dated September 11th, 2023, 49 Metcalfe Street Heritage Attributes and Designation Recommendation to the October 10th, 2023 Heritage Guelph meeting, moved by Jaudat. And is there a seconder? I see Cameron's on my screen with his hand up. Perfect. And Jack, do you mind stopping share so that I can do a vote? Perfect. So all in favor? Excellent. Perfect. Thanks, everyone. So
Thank
then we will move along to our second item then, which is 211 Silver Creek Parkway South Heritage Attributes and Designation Recommendation, also with Jack.
Just give me a moment, please, to pull up my slides. So I hope everyone had an opportunity to read the staff report. As you may remember from the previous time that this came to the committee, this is actually Victoria's file, but she's on vacation. She's actually in Paris today. So I'll be managing the discussion for the heritage attributes for 211 Silver Creek, and Stephen is here as well to answer any questions the committee may have. So the heritage attributes we've identified are all exterior stone walls, all extant exterior stone trim features, all existing roof lines and the original irregular footprint, all original door and window openings, all extant original window sash elements, slate roof cladding, all existing chimneys, and all extant stained glass windows. We're happy to answer any questions or hear any comments that the committee may have on the heritage attributes for the Sleeman property.
So, oh, perfect. Cameron's hand is up. Cameron, go for it.
Yeah, just one comment I have is there a need to be a little bit more descriptive in these attributes? Like it's a fairly complicated building, just things like all extant exterior wood trim features and all original doors and windows. Is there an indication of like which ones are original and which ones aren't? Or is there value in being a little bit more descriptive in these attributes?
I'll maybe get Stephen to chime in here, but these, I think, when we say all, it's kind of a blanket description for, and if, yeah, as you can see in this image here, like the window openings on the motel addition are not original, but any of the windows and doors within the Victorian building, those would be considered original. Stephen, do you have anything to add? And
Oh, sorry, Jack.
go ahead.
I think that opening with the extant original building form indicates that the heritage attributes are limited to the original building, the 1890 Queen Anne style residence. So the attributes that follow after that relate only to that portion of the building. If I'm not, Cameron, I'm not sure if that answers your question from Jack and myself, but
Yeah, I think so. I think I was just questioning, yeah, if it was designated and then later on somebody wanted to change something, basically anything in the original building would be put under heritage review and not
Yeah.
they wouldn't be able to change it, basically.
Yeah, I think the more descriptive heritage attributes for some designations are because, say, some window openings may not be significant, so we would specify which ones are. But with this building, just about everything is significant, which is why we have such a broad and kind of extensive list of heritage attributes that covers everything instead of specific attributes like specific windows.
Okay, fair enough. That's helpful. Thanks. And then a second question. I think we talked about it last meeting. Any interior features that were identified that might want to be included? I think there was talk of fireplaces or things like that.
Yeah, so we haven't been able to do an interior site visit, so we can't confirm the existence of any interior features. I think our view is that getting this building designated is more important than waiting for the opportunity to designate the interior. Additionally, like my approach to heritage attributes, especially for interior features, I'll generally only list interior features if they're in public spaces, like the entrance to a city hall or a church interior. More residential interiors like this, I'm a little bit hesitant to list interior attributes without owner support. And as far as I'm aware, Victoria has not made contact with the owners of this property yet.
Okay. Is the goal to get some contact with them before proceeding with designation?
It's not for lack of trying. We are trying to get in contact with them.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
Is it helpful if I stop sharing my screen? Yeah, I can see everybody.
Are there other questions for Jack on this one? Not seeing anyone else turn. Thank you for the note, David. As I say, I'm not seeing anybody else turn their cameras on. I will need it though if the motion moves forward. So there's a recommended motion that Heritage, oops, sorry, I moved it on my screen, that Heritage Guelph supports the heritage attributes identified for 211 Silver Creek Parkway South as outlined in the staff report dated September 11, 2023, and that Heritage Guelph recommends that City Council give notice to its intention to designate 211 Silver Creek Parkway South pursuant to Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So if I have someone to move that motion or motions. Thank you, Lara. And a seconder. And thank you, David. So all those in favor? Perfect. That's everyone. Excellent. Thank you. And so for our next one then, I will ask Kim and David to turn off their microphones and their cameras as we get into, thank you, into our next one, which is 2187 Gordon Street, Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report, Heritage Attributes and Designation Recommendation with a presentation from Stephen.
Thank you, Sarah. Just to begin with, I wanted to call everyone's attention. You've probably seen it already, but on our agenda, the revised agenda, we do have a delegation registered, and that's Jennifer Meter. I'm not certain of Ms. Meter's intention, but Sarah, feel free to offer the ability for the delegate to speak. Just to provide a bit of an introduction, and I will be putting several slides up on the screen just momentarily. But I wanted to first of all thank Heritage Guelph members for the research and work, which hard work actually in research, and the contributions that you make to what often turn out to be quite complicated or at least complex heritage research that goes into creating designation reports. I want to make sure that the committee members are aware that we're very appreciative of research that is done voluntarily by Heritage Guelph members. It's these reports are at times sort of a compilation of the work that's been done, information that's been found by staff, by heritage research assistants. So it's something that staff wanted to make sure that the committee members were aware that we're quite appreciative of. Now I will share my screen because I'd like to talk basically to, sorry, Sarah, I'm just going to make sure I've got the right screen on my, okay. And, all right. Now just, Sarah, let me know when you can see what's on my screen appearing on your screen.
We're good. I can see it.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure we're at full screen here. All right. So 2187 Gordon Street contains what's known historically as the Kid Barn, a barn that has two parts that's clear in the description, but also what's known now as the Blair House or Blair Farmhouse. Staff has put together a cultural heritage valuation report, but because of a decision to move ahead or to expedite staff's recommendation to the committee, but also to council in October, a list of suggested heritage attributes has been included in the staff report. So this, just to be sure, this isn't the customary. We normally come forward first with a CHER report. In this case, we're doing both at once in order to expedite. So I would like to just go straight to the information that's been provided here, which really is a comes right from the staff report, and talk first about how the Kidd Barn and the Blair Farmhouse, how the two buildings on their own and together exhibit cultural heritage value, and the ways that they satisfy any of the three sections of cultural the criteria, the 9 criteria that make up cultural heritage value. So the Kidd Barn at 2187 Gordon Street meets criteria 1 because it does exhibit design or physical value. This is an early and rare example of a stone slot bank barn, and it was built by 1842. The stone slot bank barn was constructed using local fieldstone with slots in the walls, and the building is now the only one of its kind within Guelph. The Blair Farmhouse also meets criteria 1, as it is an early and rare example of a material or construction method, and that is the use of formed concrete for wall construction in a rural residential building. I would like to think that the committee members have had a chance to read through this rather lengthy report, so I wanted to touch on the idea that the barn, the stone slot barn, at least the stone portion of it toward the rear, is rare but also unique within Guelph. The Kidd Barn also meets criteria 2 because it exhibits design or physical value. It has a high degree of craftsmanship that's rarely preserved. The constructors utilized local materials, including fieldstone in the immediate vicinity, and the implementation of slots for ventilation was at that time a practical and highly efficient method of maintaining structural integrity of the barn. Moving on to historical and associative value, the Kidd Barn does meet criteria 4, as it's linked with the Kidd family, who occupied the property from the mid to late 19th century. James Kidd settled in the township of Buslinch in 1830 and contributed to the agricultural community at that time. Agriculture was integral to the local economy during this time, and the Kidd and Blair families were active within Wellington County's agricultural trade. The Blair Farmhouse has cultural heritage value in that it meets criteria 4. It is connected to the Blair family, who were early settlers of the Puslinch area, and the Blair family had farms on both sides of Gordon Street in this location. They emigrated from Scotland in the 1870s, and the family was well known for their extensive orchards. Moving on to contextual value. The Kidd Barn meets criteria 7, as it's important in defining, maintaining, and supporting the character of the area. The Kidd Barn and Blair Farmhouse the Kidd Barn and the farmhouse both support the agricultural landscape of the area. So the property maintains and defines the surrounding use as it was used over the past 2 centuries. So the Kidd Barn is physically, visually, and historically connected with the adjacent mid 19th century farm property at 2162 Gordon Street, which is identified as the Marco Longo Farm. The Marco Longo Farm is a protected cultural heritage landscape. The Kidd Barn was built into the bank and retains its function in the specific location of the barn in the landscape. The property is associated with the Blair family and represents a rural agricultural grouping along Gordon Street. The John Blair Farmhouse at 2187 Gordon Street has contextual value because it's historically linked to its surroundings. James Blair, who was a Scottish immigrant to Puslinch Township, bought the farm across the road from the Kidd across the road from the Kidd Farm in the 1870s. Blair's son, William G. Blair, purchased the subject property in 1906, and his brother, John Blair, built the formed concrete house about 1907. John and his wife, Mina, lived in the farmhouse for more than 50 years. So the Kidd Barn and the Blair farmhouse at 2187 Gordon Street, they meet criteria 9 because they are landmarks along the Gordon Street as people move north further into city limits. The 2187 Gordon Street has been visible along Gordon Street for decades, and the position of the barn and farmhouse in comparison to Gordon Street provides a clear view of the property from the roadway. I'd like to move on to the heritage attributes themselves. And Sarah, I'm happy to entertain questions, but it might be best just to work through these points first and then move to that, whether we move to questions or to a delegate.
I think you're good to keep going, Stephen, and then
Okay.
if questions we can ask them after you're done.
Okay. So the heritage attributes are divided into sections that reflect the barns, the barn as having 2 sections and then the house separate from that. So in the stone slot bank barn, the attributes would include the 3 door openings on the south or the lower wall and the upper door on the south wall. The original form of the bank barn with an end gable roof line and a single-story north wall and a 2-story south wall. The location and orientation of the stone bank barn is significant and should be an attribute to maintain the building as being built across a slope. The exterior and interior of all extant stone walls of the slot bank barn are recommended as heritage attributes, and all original slot ventilation openings and window and door openings seen in exterior and interior extant stone walls. And those include the west gable wall, the east gable interior wall, and the 2-story south wall. That east gable wall is actually contained within the entire barn, as it was made an interior wall when the eastern addition was created. So moving on to the heavy timber bank barn addition, which is on the east side of the barn, closer the side that faces Gordon Street. The attributes should include the original form of the heavy timber bank barn addition with its gable roofline and single-story north wall and the 2-story south wall. The attributes include location and orientation of the heavy timber bank barn addition to maintain the building as being built into the slope. The vertically oriented exterior wood board cladding should be an attribute. And the extant or surviving or existing cutouts in vertical boards of the upper north and south gable walls that create the shape of a Florian cross. The original heavy timber framing members, including pole rafters and hand-hewn posts and beams and original joinery, are recommended as heritage attributes. The tape-pointed stone wall exterior of the lower level is also seen as an attribute. The imbrication or pattern created by the pressed metal sheets cladding the roof is also indicated or recommended as an attribute. And finally, for the heritage attributes recommended for the Blair farmhouse, staff recommends that the original 2-story form of the house with its hip roof and L plan, and also the exterior walls constructed of formed in place concrete, which are covered with a render that's incised with a pattern that mimics ashlar stone. So I've essentially read through the material that you have seen, which is really a synopsis of what's contained within the staff report. And Sarah, I'm at your you feel free to take it to the next section.
Perfect.
Would you like me to leave the images on or take that off?
I think we all have access to them, and it's easier, I think, if you don't share screens that we can see everyone. Thank you. So I'll open it up to questions to Stephen or comments if those are helpful. Cameron, go ahead.
First thing I wanted to bring up, I guess, so there was an attachment to the agenda of some correspondence from Brian Scarrett with some other comments and feedback on the staff report and other information in there. I just want to confirm that those comments will be received by staff and any updates made to the documentation as needed. Or do we have to formally move that correspondence be considered? I just want to make sure that it'll be under consideration.
Sarah, through you, Sarah, staff we've received the same correspondence from Brian, and his suggestions are being considered now, and this is important information that we'll consider as we put together the staff report for council.
Okay.
Just want to understand. Sorry, Cam. I don't know if you.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I've read Brian's notes in terms of, just in some cases a typo here and there, widow is misspelled, that sort of thing. And then some other details on the date of construction and so on. And I think we would all agree that it's important that the report be as accurate as possible before anything is submitted to council, just in case there's some opposition to designation down the road. So I guess what we want to understand, Cam, I think this is the question you asked, in order to make sure that those items are reviewed and included in the report to council, is a motion required by Heritage Guelph? Because if so, I would like to make that motion.
Through you, Sarah, I don't believe it's a requirement, although as I've just suggested, it is information that's being considered by staff in our preparations.
Okay, I may work on a motion anyway, but we can continue with questions while I do that.
It definitely can be included in Heritage Guelph's comments on this topic. So.
Okay.
Are there other questions for Stephen?
I have a couple things. There was a Stantec report, the Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report from a few years ago in 2019, and there's a few other structures on the property which are identified. There's a stone ruin foundation on the property, and also another building. I think it's called the drive shed or the outbuilding as well. And I don't see those discussed in the staff report. Whether or not they should be heritage attributes or not, I think they should be at least described in the background information for context of the site. So I guess my question is why weren't those two other structures described in the staff report?
Cameron, the report that you're referring to was actually provided without prejudice, so it's not information that actually staff could include in the information being provided to the committee or to council as information coming for that particular report.
Okay, but either way, like there's knowledge that those two structures are on the property.
Correct. The shed, as for the shed itself, it is something that's obviously quite close to the bank barn, but it wasn't included as something that merits designation by staff's recommendation.
Okay, I mean, should it at least be discussed in the description of the site and things like that those are on the property? Or is it not important?
There is a map that's included in the illustrations, or the attachment 1, and the detail map that zooms in basically to the subject barn in the house, that shed building is within that range, so that could be identified at least as where it sits within that context.
Okay. Yeah, I think it should be at least identified, yeah.
Cameron, do you have any other questions or comments?
One thing on the attributes for the house building, the farmhouse building, the foundation isn't listed as an attribute, I don't think. And I think reading the report, the foundation is possibly older than the house above grade. I'm wondering if the foundation should be specifically listed as an attribute as well. It's a stone, I think, foundation.
Cameron, that's a good question. The foundation itself is described in the report. Staff can take that under your suggestion and consider that in our discussions before the council report is presented to council.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions for Stephen from other committee members? Or Cameron, of course, if you have other questions, you're welcome to ask them. Not cutting you off by any means.
I don't have
Perfect.
a question, but could I put a motion forward on including the information sent by Brian Scarrett to be voted on?
Yep.
Okay, so this is my proposed motion.
Sorry there, Miranda.
Yeah, sure.
This is Liz from the clerk's office. If we can just hear from the delegation before
sure.
we take any votes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Last question from me before we get to the delegation. The farmhouse being constructed of precast concrete, I think it's described in the staff report as being a rare and early example, which is correct. I'm not sure the staff report really highlights sort of why or how significant that is. I'm somewhat of a concrete nerd coming from engineering, but anyway, an example of a cast in place concrete house from 1907 is exceptionally rare. I don't think there would be any other ones in Ontario that I know of. So wondering if the report might need to speak to that a little more, just how rare it really is for that time period.
Through you, Sarah, the report does indicate that it is early, and for that reason, it's rare. It's would be quite a study to try to understand or to locate other examples of it. But I think that we do have it described in the report, and we'll look for any opportunity to maybe ameliorate that before this goes to council.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
And so to our delegation, then if there are no other questions for Stephen. Jennifer, excellent. We will pass it to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
You're good.
All right, great. As indicated, my name is Jennifer Meter. I'm legal counsel to number company 2575950 Ontario Inc., which is the owner of the property, municipally known as 2187 Gordon Street. And Madam Chair, through you, I'm here to request that this matter be deferred to allow for consultation with my client. We understand that the city has been contemplating designation of this property since 2011. That's 12 years without any action. Yet, since my client purchased the property in 2019, no one from the city's heritage department has reached out to my client to discuss the importance of maintaining the structures on the property from the city's perspective, or the prospect of designating the property under the Ontario Heritage Act. And now the barn structure has partially collapsed, and my client has been issued an order to comply with the city's property standards bylaw, which I should note does not speak to heritage conservation. A structural engineer has also reviewed the condition of the barn. He has advised my client that it would be unsafe to repair the barn. Given the condition of the barn, there is risk of further collapse and physical harm to workers if a repair was sought. And my client is not prepared to take on that potential liability, nor should it be asked to. We also have some concerns with heritage staff attending on the property on July 27th, 2023, without express permission from my client, but we will be following up on those concerns through the appropriate channels. And it's also important to note that through the new Clare Maltby secondary plan, which remains under appeal, the city has designated the property for high density residential uses in the location of the existing structures. Therefore, a balanced approach is required that would allow for the implementation of the city's own planning vision for the lands, with pragmatic considerations of the potential cultural heritage value and how that value should be conserved. Given these circumstances, it would be prudent for discussions to occur among heritage staff, my client and my client's heritage consultant, to discuss the appropriate means of conserving any cultural heritage resources on the property. As you know, such means can include commemoration, reuse of materials in the future redevelopment of the site, and many other creative solutions. So therefore, as I said, Madam Chair, we believe the designation process is premature, and the matter should be deferred to allow for long overdue consultation with the property owner. Subject to any questions, those are my submissions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I'll note to Heritage Guelph committee members that you are permitted to ask questions only of Jennifer. It's not discussion or commentary. So if there are any questions from anyone, you're welcome to ask. And I believe it's questions like clarification questions. Not seeing anyone unmute or raise their hand.
Yeah. Yes,
Yep.
I have a small question concerning the engineer. The report of the engineer who said that it's not safe to restore the building and etc. etc. Is this like like it's very sensitive an issue like this to come up and be raised? Usually there are scaffoldings that can be used, and there are safety factors that also can be used so that the building will not collapse and hurt the restoration process. So I wonder if this engineer has a detailed report in which he specified exactly what are the high risks that are gonna take place in case someone tries to restore the building. Okay, just is this report available for review? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, the report, a draft report has been prepared and is in the process of being finalized. We have not had a sufficient time to bring it forward to this committee meeting. It will be considered through the property standards process, which is underway. And as I said, there's an appeal and a hearing scheduled for this Wednesday. So there is a report prepared by the engineer. It is not yet final, but will be in the coming days.
Cameron, go ahead.
To that, I think you said your client bought the property in 2019, so I'm wondering if they were aware of the condition of that wall at that point and why an engineering report was not done at that point and rather waiting until a collapse happened. I'm not sure if that's too far of a question to ask, but Just wanted to ask that if they were aware of the condition when they purchased the property.
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't know if they were aware of the structural condition of that wall in 2019. And I don't know if they commissioned, it is not, to my knowledge, they did not commission an engineering report at the time of purchase. And I remind you that at the time of purchase, the property to this day was not designated. It is not a designated property, and there's no obligation on my client's part to conserve structures at the time of the purchase of the property in 2019 up until now.
Laura? Oh, you're just muted, sorry.
Thanks. No, just curious, I understand that it wasn't designated. It is not designated. Was your client aware of it being on the listed register for the city and the associated property standards requirements that apply to all properties in Guelph?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, my client was aware of the listing of the property and is obviously aware of the property standards bylaw and is working through that process through the appropriate people on the property standards process. And it's not directly relevant for purposes of this committee, but the property standards bylaw regulates the maintenance and or clearing of properties in order to comply with the requirements under that bylaw and the Ontario Building Code. It's not mandatory to repair structures under that process. Demolition is also an option, but again, we are working through that process, which is ongoing, and an appeal has been launched.
Yep, Laura, you can keep asking, and then we'll go to Kathy.
Thanks. I just had a follow-up to that in terms of the listed. You just keep suggesting that they didn't, or that the property isn't designated, but given that it's listed and given that there have been reports on the property, including the importance of that barn, I'm just curious as to, why your client didn't think that it was important to maintain it.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure that I am in a position to answer that question. And and again, any reference to reports, I don't know of any public reports being on the record, except for the one that was issued over the past previous days.
Yeah, and I'll just note that the goal is not to debate any of these pieces, but okay, so you can keep asking another question, Laura.
Yeah, no, I was just going to point to the Claire Maltby study that you pointed out is all that is one public document that does include this property. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Kathy?
Through you, Chair. So I'm a little confused that you didn't know. So you bought the property in 2019, or Maltby did. Madame Homes, or it's a number company, right? The Claire Maltby secondary plan started in 2017. This was throughout that process, this barn was identified as a heritage asset. I believe that's part of your appeal to the OT, but I'll leave that. So I'm trying to understand how you're claiming that you didn't know that, even though it wasn't designated, but that it was going down that road, and that nobody's asked you anything. So I don't recall you coming to City Council, but maybe you did. Maybe it's just my recollection. Madame Holmes coming and saying they disagreed with this, at that time, a heritage designation on heritage assets around in this Claire Maltby secondary plan. But there may have been a letter. I may be wrong. That was a couple of years ago, but certainly we were well into the process in 2019.
Through you, Madam Chair, I appreciate the comments. I would note that I did not indicate that my client was unaware I did not say that. That was those. That way. I just want to be clear. I said that at the time of purchase in 2019, my client was aware that it was listed, and that no one had come from staff to speak to my client about the designation process or its interests in having my client maintain or conserve any structures on the property. Those conversations were never had. In terms of the Clare Maltby secondary plan process, yes, my client has appealed. That is an appellant to that document. And part of their appeal is in relation to how the policies treat this property from a cultural heritage perspective. And I don't want to get into the details because that's under appeal and in mediation, but the point of that concern, which we did alert staff to and council to through submissions, is that it's inappropriate to indirectly attempt to conserve or maintain what the city believes to be cultural heritage resources through the secondary plan process. That is a matter that should be left to the Ontario Heritage Act, which is within your jurisdiction, Madam Chair and members of committee.
Which is why we're here today, right? Is that why we're here today, right? That's why we're discussing this today.
Which is why
I agree. That's why.
So you're saying this is the proper venue, and that's why we're here today. Okay, so you agree with that. So that's part of your appeal. So we're here today. So you were waiting for us, even though you knew, you were waiting for the city. I don't even know if the city knew that it had changed hands, but I mean, who knows, right? You were waiting for the city to approach you, even though you knew that it was a heritage interest. And you didn't participate in any of the open houses or any of the, I know you've appealed now, but you didn't participate in any of the public engagement with the Clare Maltby secondary plan.
Through you, Madam Chair, my client participated in every opportunity given to it through that process leading up to the passing of the Clare Maltby secondary plan, which again, I reiterate, is a separate process from the one that you have jurisdiction over here. And I would also note my client had no obligation to reach out to the city about designation. It's the city that initiates that process under the Ontario Heritage Act.
Right.
The city, we understand, have been contemplating that for 12 years. We learned that recently through the media. And so that is why we're asking for a deferral in order for consultation to occur. Now that we understand the city's intention to move forward with the designation of this property.
So you understand that through the media, but you were involved in the Clare Maltby secondary plan where it was clear the city had intention to designate this property because it was identified as an cultural heritage asset. So that's what I'm hearing you say. And so you knew that was our intention, even though they hadn't directly told you. It was part of that public process, that was clearly the intention. And you're in agreement that today we're here under the Heritage Act as a committee to do that process, which you think is the proper process instead of the secondary plan. So, okay, so we're in agreement.
I have a question myself. I'm curious what this consultation looks like that you're suggesting your client would like to engage with the city on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The consultation would look at, as I said, a balanced approach. We would hope to consider how the cultural heritage resources on the property can be conserved, not necessarily through a repair of any structures on the property, but through other means, as I indicated, could include commemoration, reuse of materials, and so forth, and that would consider that conservation approach in the context of the planning vision that the city also has for this site, to come up with an agreeable approach to conserving any cultural heritage resources that would also allow for the residential uses to be developed as contemplated by the secondary plan.
Okay. Thank you for that. Are there other questions for Jennifer? And then I may open it up if there are other questions for Stephen that potentially have arisen. So first, if there's any more questions for Jennifer. Laura?
Just had a lot of go around. Can I just really be clear here and what we're being asked then by Jennifer and their client? We're being asked to defer this decision until the client and the city have had a chance to discuss a potential alternative process. Is that what we're being asked to do?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we are requesting a deferral to allow for consultation to discuss the appropriate means of conserving any cultural heritage resources on the property in balance with the overall planning intention for the site to be developed with residential uses.
And Laura, to your question, if folks felt a deferral was appropriate, someone could propose a motion to defer, which would then be voted on by the committee. Are there any other questions for our delegate, Jennifer? Not seeing any. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
And then I'll suggest again, if there are any other questions for Stephen, I'll open the floor to that as well. Kathy.
So Stephen, I just want to hear your response to the deferral. So my understanding is, you know, the Heritage Committee, if they feel that this is worthy of designation, that that would be the recommendation, that would be the expertise of the committee to make that recommendation. And then if the owners of Academy Homes wants to come to council, that's where a deferral for further direction to staff to do further consultation should probably come from. I'm just thinking of process here and what that order might be.
Kathy, or Councillor Downer, thanks for that question. Staff is not against deferral at this point. If it's suggested for Heritage at the stage of Heritage Guelph's consultation, but as you've said, it's possible that the property owner could request deferral when this goes to council as well.
I'm a little concerned because it's before the OLT and it sounds like what's in mediation, that I don't know how a parallel consultation outside of that process can go. You know, I don't, maybe these are on camera issues, but how could that can go on with staff outside of that process? So
it's something that staff would need to discuss this internally to see what you know, how this might actually occur with the appeals going on. So I don't have a direct answer to that question right now.
Yeah, so that would be it's just a concern that there would be then consultation going on with Heritage staff. And then there's this other process going on, which is a much more legal process. But that Academy Homes doesn't believe have a role in heritage designations anyway, from what we heard. So I'm just a little confused about how the deferral would work. Like, really, I mean, for us to, first of all, I don't know that the committee can direct staff to do that kind of consultation outside of an OLT mediation process. So I'm just a little murky here. I'm a little concerned.
Councillor Downer, Melissa Aldonate is in the meeting and wishes to respond as well.
Come in and provide some assistance with this request for the deferral. So as the delegate mentioned, it's two separate processes. So the appeal to the Clare Multi secondary plan is separate from this designation. what I would suggest is the deferral that they're requesting today. We could put some timelines to it to bring back, and the consultation that they're asking for, in my opinion, would be centered on what are the heritage attributes for a designation, which is separate from any issues before the OLT related to land use or cultural heritage conservation. And we're strictly on that matter in terms of the designation. Is it appropriate for this property to be designated? Does it meet the criteria? And what are the attributes to be protected through a designation bylaw? Future means for conservation would be discussed at the time of an application on the property, whether a designation bylaw was in place or not, depending on status under the Ontario Heritage Act at that time. So I hope that's helpful, but if there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. But again, staff is supportive of a deferral at this time, but I would suggest that we set a timeline to it.
If I could just make a comment through you, Chair. We have apparently, or Guelph has been considering designating this property since 2011. We all can see the value of this property. The house is very rare. The stone slot barn, very rare. I know there's one on the way to Elora. I think there used to be one a little closer to Guelph that was torn down when a used car lot purchased the property. And to delay further at this point seems to me to just be encouraging more degradation of that property. Heritage Guelph is not responsible for considering balance or with the developer's needs or wants or anything else. We have considered designating this property for a long time. I see no reason to defer at this point. We can make our motion, vote on our motion, have our position put on the record. If staff chooses not to act on that motion, that's up to staff, but at least Heritage Guelph will have made our position clear. And so for me, at least, I would not suggest that we defer this any further. And that's it for me.
I just want to jump in and say I totally agree with Miranda there. Like, the opinion we provide as a committee, it does not really matter if there's additional consultation that needs to be done. It's really our opinion at this point based on what was presented to us. So I don't think we need to defer our emotions or our votes or anything like that.
Kathy?
I would add to that. I think if there's consultation can happen right up until this comes to council, and then it continues to on. But if Heritage Guelph thinks these are the attributes that you want protected, then that I see that as valuable. I mean, those negotiations can happen right up until council, and council can listen to the delegation again and make it an assessment this time. But I think Heritage Guelph's role is to sort of make a recommendation on the value of the heritage attributes at this point. That's my sense, and that's just me as a councillor. But that's my sense. I think I certainly agree with what I've just heard.
Are there other questions or comments? Or Stephen, did you want to say anything else?
No further comments at this point. Thank you.
So if I may, there are 3 parts to the recommended motion that were provided in the agenda. And Miranda, I know you had a comment regarding the correspondence, and I've adjusted, and I'll read it to the committee to see if this sort of satisfies, I think, Cameron and Miranda's comments about the correspondence. The first part of the motion, what reads now on my screen, is that the comments provided by Heritage Guelph members and correspondence received by Brian Scarrett on the 2187 Gordon Street Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report be provided to staff and council for their consideration. So that's the only motion I've changed and added wording to, and I'll continue to read the other 2, and then I'll see if anyone wants to move all of this as one. That Heritage Guelph supports the heritage attributes identified for 2187 Gordon Street as outlined in the staff report dated September 11th, 2023, and that Heritage Guelph recommends that City Council give notice of its intention to designate 2187 Gordon Street pursuant to Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So we could pick this apart and move pieces, or we can do it all as one. So I'll ask if there's anyone who'd like to move those three pieces as one motion now. Cameron's moving, sure. Is there a seconder on those? And I'll need folks to put their screen on so I can see.
Open to modifying it too if we need to, Miranda. I'm not sure.
Sarah, would you mind just reading the first piece again
Sure,
that you
yeah.
rewrote? The first part of the motion?
So that the comments provided by Heritage Guelph members and correspondence received by Brian Scarrett on the 2187 Gordon Street Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report be provided to staff and council for their consideration. So the only thing I added was that correspondence be included.
Okay. For me, the motion that I was going to suggest as the first piece was that Heritage Guelph recommends that the staff report on the property at 2187 Brock Road be amended prior to being presented to council to include the information and corrections noted by Brian Scarrett in his letter to Heritage Guelph, as well as any other updates in order to strengthen the designation. And I'm not sure if there's any impact to providing the comments from Brian Scarrett separately from the report. I guess my concern is that the report be as accurate as possible before it goes forward, just to make sure that knowing, having heard everything we just heard, that we may face some opposition down the road to the designation. So that is why I suggested we amend the report. Is there any other thought on that from the rest of the committee?
Kathy?
I guess I'd have concern around suggesting that the report needs corrections or additions when staff haven't really had time to, then we're saying that everything Brian has said is correct, and it may be, but we need to be fair to staff to give them time to incorporate parts of that they see as relevant or important, or if it is a correction, but they need time to do that. So to say carte blanche, well, that's just, everything that Brian says has to be included, I think is problematic, actually.
Okay.
I think that it needs to go to staff for consideration for inclusion into the final report that goes to council. I think that's good, and I'm sure that they will consider it and include what is, what's valid. So that would be my preference, but I'm not voting on it. But I just think that carte blanche, say, oh, just include everything. That's I'm worried about even that as any kind of precedent for anything, right? So
Okay.
you need to be fair to staff to give them time to do that. So for me, it would be consideration of those.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I guess I'm okay to move it all as one, based on your change, Sarah,
So
to the first part.
sure. So I'll read it out again, and then we'll go through the process of mover, seconder, and if we get that far, a vote. So with the change I made then for the first part, that the comments provided by Heritage Guelph members and correspondence received by Brian Scarrett on the 2187 Gordon Street Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report be provided to staff and council for their consideration. That Heritage Guelph supports the heritage attributes identified for 2187 Gordon Street as outlined in the staff report dated September 11th, 2023, and that Heritage Guelph recommends that City Council give notice of its intention to designate 2187 Gordon Street pursuant to Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So is there a mover for the entire motion? Cameron? And is there a seconder? Miranda? And then so I'll need everyone who is allowed to vote to put their camera back on. So I think it's just Jaudat and Lara and myself.
Excuse me, I have a problem with my camera, I think, because, you know, I'm overseas. But yes, I vote, if, you know, but even if you don't see me, I don't think you can see me, right? Can you see me?
No, so Jaudat, are you voting in favor?
In favor, right? It's not a deferral, right? It's in favor of the, you know, moving it to the council, right?
Yes, it's in favor of that we are supporting of the heritage attributes that are listed, that our comments are being provided to staff and council for the consideration. And we are recommending that city council give notice of the intention to designate.
Yes, I'm in. Count me in, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jaudat. So that has passed. Thank you to everyone. And I'll say that Kim and David, you're welcome to at least show your faces again and turn your mic back on at appropriate times as we move into the next part of our meeting today. So thank you. Okay, so continuing along then, we have 12 Aramasa Road Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report with another presentation from Perfect. To you, Stephen.
I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm just looking for the material that I would be using to illustrate. Just bear with me for a second here.
Take your time. I think you were 3 on the agenda today, so I'm sure there's a lot going on.
Almost there. Okay. Okay, Sarah, if you could just confirm that you can see number 12 Aramasa Road on your screen.
Yep, we're good.
Great. Okay. So it's a pleasure to present kind of a synopsis of this information that really is the Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report, which contains staff's recommendation as a statement of significance for 12 Aramasa Road. And the property is presented in the photograph that I've taken on the screen. And just to be sure everyone knows, we're talking about a corner building. I may refer to it, the large 2-story building, as the red brick corner building, but also just on the left of this image is also a red brick building, the coach house, but it's been painted black. So I may refer to the stable building as that building itself. I'd like to just read through the statement of significance and make any draw to your attention any particular highlights. The 2 original buildings on this property are representative of late 19th century commercial and residential Romanesque revival architecture. Both buildings have high physical integrity in that they've retained most of their original architectural design features in red brick and limestone, and they display a high degree of craftsmanship. So 12 Aramasa has direct associations with a theme, and that's of historical mixed use involving local corner stores with housing above. The property is important in defining and maintaining and supporting the architectural character of the Aramasa Road and Arthur Street North streetscapes. And because it's two buildings maintain their original configuration, they are functionally, visually, and historically linked. The proximity of the corner store doors and windows to the street gives it visual prominence at the intersection of these historic streetscapes. And finally, the building's distinctive form, the corner location, the elaborate red brick and limestone construction makes it a landmark within the historic Aramasa Hills streetscape. Now, just to reiterate, this is a report from staff that makes recommendations as to the cultural heritage evaluation of the property. So no heritage attributes are identified at this time. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have about this evaluation report.
Thanks, Stephen. Any questions regarding the report? Cameron?
Just a question for you, Stephen. Have you reached out to the owner yet, and have they been sort of supportive of designation?
So, Cameron, because this is an evaluation report, and essentially the first of two stages, before the preparation of recommendation of heritage attributes comes to Heritage Guelph, the owners would be contacted and made aware of staff's recommendations and the scheduling of the presentation of the next report to the committee. And in doing so, that would make the owners well aware of a possible path that this may go on toward council if it goes in that direction.
Great, thanks.
Other questions? All right, seeing no one move to unmute or raise their hand, I'll present the motion that's in front of us and looking for a mover and a seconder. So that the comments provided by Heritage Guelph members on the 12 Aramasa Road Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report be provided to staff and council for their consideration. Is there someone who will move that? Thank you, Miranda. And a seconder? Kim? And then all those in favor? Perfect. And is Jaudat still with us, or have we seem to have lost him? One of the challenges of overseas, but I believe that has carried in his absence. Oh. Jaudat may be back. Do we need to redo the vote? Oh.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, we got you a few times on my screen at least. Jaudat, were you present for the motion?
Yes.
Okay, and are you in favor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
All right. We will move on then to our last presentation, which is 220 Gordon Street Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report, also with Stephen.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And just loading this up, the related images. Just bear with me for a second. Okay, now if you see number 220 Gordon Street in front of you, I can begin my description.
You're good.
Good. So I'm happy to provide this evaluation, or the result of staff's evaluation of 220 Gordon Street. It's a property that's quite prominent, and most people are pass it many days of the week on their way up the College Hill. The statement of significance that staff recommends is basically as you've read, and is as follows: that 220 Gordon Street is a representative example of limestone construction from the mid-19th century. It has a 1875 addition that has a corner entrance door with a rare rounded 2-story limestone corner. So criteria 4 of under the regulation is met as the property has direct associations with the theme of historical mixed use involving local corner stores with housing above. It's interesting. I find it fascinating to be presenting two very similar properties in today's meeting. It's the property at 220 Gordon Street is important in defining and maintaining and supporting the architectural character of the area. This segment of Gordon Street streetscape is an important historic element, which is adjacent to the Brooklyn and College Hill Heritage Conservation District. The stone building is visually and historically linked to its surroundings. The close proximity of the corner store door and corner store doors and flanking windows to the street gives it visual prominence at this intersection within the historic Gordon Street streetscape. And finally, the building's distinctive form and specifically its limestone construction makes it a landmark within the historic Gordon Street and College Hill streetscape. So I will be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thanks, Stephen. Any questions? Cameron?
Yeah, a quick question for me. Thanks, Stephen, for providing figure 6, which shows the different years of construction. It really helps understand this building is kind of a complex building. Question about the roof line of the original 1800s portions. Do you know if that's similar to what it was originally like, or was it sort of changed when that third floor was added on? I'm just wondering about attributes going forward. Would the roof be part of it or not?
Sarah, I'm happy to respond to Cameron's question. Would it be, and if it's helpful, maybe I could put the photo back on the screen by sharing
Sure.
the screen. Okay. Cameron, can you see the photo?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, as you've learned through the, or as we all learned through the research and then the report itself that staff's presented, the earliest part of the stone building, if you can see my cursor, it's basically within here. And as the report states, there is what looks like a firewall. It's essentially the extension in a parapet of the stone wall. What used to be the northernmost wall of this building, and although I have no documentary evidence, my opinion would be that this building would have been a gable roof building with a typical gable end that you see there. It's not. I think there's so little left of the. I haven't been inside the building to inspect the attic or any of the framing, that sort of thing, but I don't think that's really necessary. I think with all the changes that have happened since the 1920s and onward with this building to create the third story, really, I think it's safe to assume that there would likely be very little of the older 2-story building within that. The only part in my recommendations and in the staff report, I think it's fairly clear that what is extant or surviving really is the change to the 1875 addition that's near the corner or in the corner part of the building. So that curved hip roof corner and the hip roof dormer that were added, those wouldn't have, they may not have been part of the 1875 addition other than the rounded roof. But it's, I think the main attributes that are presented or suggested here deal more so with the stone walls as opposed to the roof lines.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense. Thanks for going through that. It's an interesting building.
It is.
Are there other questions for Stephen? Not seeing any hands or anyone unmute. So our recommended motion then is that the comments provided by Heritage Guelph members on the 220 Gordon Street Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report be provided to staff and council for their consideration. Is there a mover? Jaudet, perfect. And a seconder? Thank you, David. And all those in favor? Excellent. That's all of us. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Stephen and Jack, for those presentations. I'll note that there are no staff announcements today, so we'll skip right to adjournment. So if someone could move adjournment for us. We can stay on this call all day together. Thank you, Kim. And a seconder, Cameron, was that your hand up for that? Or we'll go with Laura, that's perfect. And then all in favor. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. And I guess we'll be seeing each other next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.